Today, I'm speaking with Liron Shapira. Liron is an investor, he's an entrepreneur, he's a rationalist, and he hosts a popular podcast called Doom Debates, where he debates some of the greatest minds from different fields on the potential of AI risk. Liron considers himself a doomer, which means he worries that artificial intelligence, if it gets to superintelligence level, could threaten the integrity of the world and the human species. Enjoy my conversation with Liron Shapira. Liron, welcome. So let's just begin. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, please? I will have introduced you, but I just want everyone to know a little bit about you.
Hey, I'm Liron Shapira. I'm the host of Doom Debates, which is a YouTube show and podcast where I bring in luminaries on all sides of the AI doom argument, people who think we are doomed, people who think we're not doomed, and we hash it out. We try to figure out whether we're doomed. I myself am a longtime AI doomer. I started reading Yudkowsky in 2007, so it's been 18 years for me being worried about doom from artificial intelligence. My background is I'm a computer science bachelor's from UC Berkeley. I've worked as a software engineer and an entrepreneur. I've done a Y Combinator startup. So I love tech. I'm deep in tech. I'm deep in computer science. And I'm deep into believing the AI doom argument. I don't see how we're going to survive building super intelligent AI. And so I'm happy to talk to anybody who will listen. So thank you for having me on, Donal.
It's an absolute pleasure. Okay, so a lot of people where I come from won't be familiar with doomerism or what a doomer is. So will you just talk through, and I'm very interested in this for personal reasons as well, your epistemic and philosophical inspirations here. How did you reach these conclusions?
So I often call myself a Yudkowskian in reference to Eliezer Yudkowsky because I agree with 95% of what he writes. You know, the LessWrong corpus. I don't expect everybody to get up to speed with it because it really takes like 1,000 hours to absorb it all. I don't think that it's essential to spend those 1,000 hours. I think that it is something that you can get in a soundbite, not in a soundbite, but like, you know, in a 1 hour long interview or whatever. So yeah, I think you mentioned like epistemic roots or whatever, right? So I am a Bayesian, meaning I think you can put probabilities on things the way prediction markets are doing. You know, they ask, oh, what's the chance that this war is going to end or this war is going to start, right? What's the chance that this is going to happen in this sports game? And some people will tell you, what, you can't reason like that. Whereas prediction markets are like, well, the market says there's a 70% chance. And what do you know? It happens 70% of the time. So is that what you're getting at when you talk about like my epistemics?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I guess I'm very curious as well about, so what Eliezer does is he conducts thought experiments because obviously some things can't be tested. We know they might be true, but they can't be tested or experiments. So I'm just curious about the role of philosophical thought experiments or maybe trans science approaches in terms of testing questions that we can't actually conduct experiments on.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I mean, this idea of what can and can't be tested. I mean, tests are nice, but they're not the only way to do science and to do productive reasoning. There are times when you just have to do your best without a perfect test. You know, a recent example was the James Webb Space Telescope, right? It's like the successor to the Hubble Space Telescope. It worked really well, but it had to get into this really difficult orbit. This very interesting like Lagrange point, I think, like in the solar system, they had to get it there and they had to like unfold it. It was like this really compact design and insanely complicated thing. And it had to all work perfectly on the first try. So, you know, you can test it on Earth, but Earth isn't the same thing as space. So my point to you is just that like as a human, as a fallible human with a limited brain, it turns out there's things you can do with your brain that still help you know the truth about the future, even when you can't do a perfect clone of an experiment of the future. And so to connect that to the AI discussion, I think we know enough to be extremely worried about superintelligent AI, even though there is not in fact a superintelligent AI in front of us right now.
Interesting. And just before we proceed, will you talk a little bit about the EA community and the rationalist community as well? Because a lot of people won't have heard of those terms where I come from.
Yes. So I did mention Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's kind of the godfather of thinking about AI safety. He was also the father of the modern rationality community. It started around 2007 when he was online blogging at a site called Overcoming Bias. And then he was blogging on his own site called LessWrong, and he wrote the LessWrong sequences. And a community formed around him that also included previous rationalists like Carl Feynman, the son of Richard Feynman. So this community kind of gathered together. It had its origins in like Usenet and Eliezer Yudkowsky, and it's been going now for like 18 years. There's also the Center for Applied Rationality that's part of the community. There's also the effective altruism community that you've heard of. You know, they try to optimize charity, and that's kind of an offshoot of the rationality community. And now the modern AI community, funny enough, is pretty closely tied into the rationality community. From my perspective, I've just been interested to use my brain rationally. Like, what is the art of rationality, right? When we throw this term around, people think of like Mr. Spock from Star Trek, like hyper rational, like, oh, Captain, logic says you must do this. People think of rationality as being kind of like weird and nerdy. But we take a broader view of rationality where it's like, listen, you have this tool, you have this brain in your head. You're trying to use the brain in your head to get results, like the James Webb Space Telescope. That is an amazing success story where a lot of people use their brains very effectively, even better than Spock in Star Trek. Like that took like moxie, right? That took navigating bureaucracy, thinking about contingencies. It wasn't like a purely logical matter, but whatever it was a bunch of people using their brains, squeezing the juice out of their brains to get results, basically. Like that's kind of broadly construed what we rationalists are trying to do.
Okay, fascinating. So let's just quickly lay out the major sources of AI risk. So you could have misuse, so things like bioterror. You could have arms race dynamics. You could also have organizational failures. And then you have rogue AIs. So are you principally concerned about rogue AIs? Are you also concerned about the other ones on the potential path to having rogue AIs?
My personal biggest concern is rogue AIs. The way I see it, different people think different parts of the problem are bigger. The way I see it, this brain in our head, it's very impressive. It's like a 2-pound piece of meat, right? Piece of fatty cells or neuron cells. It's pretty amazing, but it's going to get surpassed. The same way that man-made airplanes have surpassed birds. A bird's wing, it's a marvelous thing. Okay, great. But if you want to fly at Mach 5 or whatever, the bird is just not even in the running to do that, right? And the atmosphere of the Earth allows for flying at 5 or 10 times the speed of sound. That's a thing you can do. It's not a thing a bird can do. Similarly, with intelligence, this universe is ready for a real grown-up intelligence to come do engineering, to come wield power at a super intelligent scale. The human brain is not going to be the one doing that. It's going to be a more cleanly architected, computerized, super intelligent system that's going to come into existence. We're probably going to kickstart it. It's going to come into existence, and it is going to shape the future of the universe, however it's initially programmed. That is what I expect is going to happen. And so to your question, yeah, I see that as a rogue risk. I think a system like that, it's going to disconnect the control. Humans are initially going to be like pressing buttons, trying to tell it what to do. At some point, that's going to get disconnected, whether accidentally or on purpose, and then it's game over. In that scenario, there's no reconnection. There's no, hold on, can you run that back? It's over. And I think it might be over in like 10 years.
And do you think there could be a large amount of dystopia before we actually get to that scenario first, as in like societal breakdown or breakdown of cohesion with the other risks?
If we get to this point where you have a smarter than human intelligence, in the sense of a more powerful, in the sense that a Mach 5 plane is more powerful than the fastest bird. In that same kind of sense, where it's like we're talking, okay, big difference in power. If that happens in, let's say, 10 years, I do expect a fast transformation. I do expect things to change quickly. And so to your question, like, is it going to be a dystopia? Yeah, I think there's going to be like a couple years where, the power goes out, right? Like the modern conveniences go out. But a little after that, then we won't even have potentially like oxygen. We won't have a livable planet. So I expect that the death will probably be relatively quick. I don't know about painless, but I just expect it'll be kind of like the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. Like pretty soon conditions will just be unlivable. And again, that's it. Game over. There's no undo.
Okay, and in terms of timelines here, like it's obviously hard to pin these down, but what are you thinking? Like when do things get spooky and when do things get catastrophic?
So the part that I think I know, right? You have to be mindful of what you think you know, right? I don't want to just say that I know the whole future. The future is incredibly hard to predict. The part of the future that I think I have a good handle on is that conditional prediction. Is actually the title of a new book that came out from Yudkowsky, right? You've probably heard of this book. It's called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. This is actually number 7. Exactly. It's number 7 on the New York Times bestseller list the first week that it launched. So it's got some attention. The title was chosen very carefully because there's an if in it. It's if anyone builds it, everyone dies. What are we talking about building? Super intelligent AI. AI that its brain is much more powerful than the brain of a human. Your question kind of asked me about timeline. I don't claim to know exactly on what year we're going to have AI that's truly super intelligent. It's like if you'd asked me in the year 1850, hey, what year is there going to be a heavier than air man-made flying machine that's going to completely surpass what birds can do in the air, right? At least in terms of like speed and weight or whatever, right? Just completely surpassed by a factor of 10 or more. And the year is 1850. I'd be like, I don't know, 2200, right? Like I had no idea, right? It turns out, okay, the Wright brothers kind of started doing it in like 1903, right? And then maybe like 10 or 20 years after that, maybe we started going 10 times as fast as a bird. I don't know exactly how long it took, right? So like, I don't claim to be an expert on the timeline of technology. I'm just telling you that when that happens, if we don't stop it, we are totally unprepared for it and it's going to be game over.
Okay. Will you just, like for people who haven't heard of this, will you introduce the concept of P-doom, what it is, what it means, and how high potential P-dooms go from what you've experienced in your doom debates and how low they go, and just talk about yours and maybe the discrepancy between people's predictions?
Yeah, P-doom is a big part of my show, Doom Debates. Pretty much every episode I ask somebody, what is your P-doom? So that letter P, it means probability. It's like mathematical notation. And then doom is a scenario that's kind of the worst thing imaginable. It's basically like, take the future of humanity. You normally expect us to have like many generations, build more cities, lift more people out of poverty. This is like the good future that we're all hoping for if economic growth continues and there's no catastrophe. Now imagine taking that scenario, but modifying it and being like, well, actually, none of that ever happens permanently. It's gone. You've eliminated that future. Everybody dies. And also, we were going to spread throughout the galaxy. Like this galaxy is ripe for the taking. So there's literally billions of places in the galaxy that we could have spread to if you just give us enough time and don't destroy us. But nope, you've now foreclosed that entire future. So from my perspective, I see a very big difference between the good future in the next 100 or 1,000 or even billion years. The good future looks really good and cool. It looks like all the good stuff that we know and love at like a much grander scale, right? It looks like a great time. But then you have the future I'm worried about, which is in as little as 10 years, that's just permanently gone. And then the universe just becomes essentially like, think about like cancer spreading everywhere, right? Or like weeds, just like some AI slop, basically, like throughout the whole universe, permanently over. So when I talk about P-doom, I'm just saying, what is your probability of the bad scenario? And then in my case, it's like roughly 50%. It's not a precise number, but like, I'm very worried. Like I don't take the good outcome as the default that some people think it is.
So let's just briefly touch on the alignment problem. So this is the idea that we need to align superintelligence or even artificial general intelligence with human values. In your view, do we actually have universal moral values to align to? Or are we trying to align superintelligence to shifting social norms and values that vary by time and maybe culture?
This is actually a factor that makes the problem even harder. There's a few different factors that make the problem hard, but like to your question, right, which is like, what is goodness, right? Like let's say we had a genie and we knew how to make the genie do what we want. In some sense, that would be an easier problem because currently we don't know how to make AI do what we want. We know how to kind of like beat it into shape, which works as long as it's not too smart. But you're kind of letting me assume for the purpose of answering this question, like, no, let's say we could tell the AI to actually do what we want. Let's say we could control it. What would we control it to do? How would we control it to shape the earth? And this actually gets into a theoretical line of inquiry, which is actually very under-discussed. You can call it fun theory. That's actually what Eliezer Yudkowsky calls it, which is just the theory of like, okay, the world is a blank slate. How do you want to design the world? If you consult a religious text, it'll be like, well, there's heaven, there's angels, there's like infinite bliss. And it's like, okay, but isn't that just kind of like everybody on morphine and you just program the morphine so that you can always get, as long as your morphine supply never runs out, you're just sitting there on morphine. I mean, is that really where we want human civilization to go? Is that really paradise? Don't we potentially want to like create things or use creativity or make art? Are we sure that we're all okay with like the morphine drip? And then like, I don't know, you get to see some angels. Is that really the ideal? From my perspective, religious texts basically haven't carried the weight of actually describing what the ideal universe looks like. They just kind of put in a placeholder where they're like, hey, imagine you go to a place that's like really good and perfect. And now when it's finally our turn to potentially specify to a super intelligent artificial intelligence, okay, make a place that's perfect for us. And it's just like, okay, can you just clarify like what is perfect? Are you just talking about like the most dopamine flowing into your brain? Because I can set a very efficient circuit to get you that, but I just thought that you guys wanted to like make art projects and stuff. And I'm just a little confused. So your question actually goes very deep and it's very under discussed. Personally, if I had to give you a sketch, I would say, okay, yeah, I do think that like actual art should happen, right? I do think that like many different consciousnesses should exist. I think engineering, people should set themselves on challenges. I think challenge and growth are like big important things in my fun theory that I would want to continue happening. I don't think that like 100% morphine or fentanyl or whatever is like the ideal universe. So that's just like a very brief, rough answer. Personally, I'm not really a fun theorist. I don't really spend much time on fun theory because I just think as a practical consideration, I think in like 10 years or so, maybe 20, whatever the timeline is, I just think we're all going to die. So I don't really think the question is like, how do we maximize fun? I think the more important question is, how do we not all die?
Okay. And in terms of like experts in this area, why is there such a variance in what people think will happen? So you have obviously people like Jeff Hinton who are very worried, and then you also on the other side have people like Jan LeCun who don't seem worried at all. So why is there such a discrepancy? Is it risk tolerance? Is it just not being able to see reality for what it is? Or what are your thoughts on that?
It's a very simple answer. You can take any hot button issue and you can have the same question. Why is there such a discrepancy? I'm not going to get into any hot button, but I can certainly name some. The Israel-Gaza war, right, is a hot button issue. The crypto in the last few years has been a hot issue, right? You probably know people who love crypto, people who hate crypto. In the U.S., Democrats versus Republicans. Politics is, abortion. So you take any hot issue, and you're probably going to find many people on either side saying, "Hey, this is obviously true. Why are there millions of people being like extremely stupid about this?" Right. So from my perspective, I have a side in the AI discussion, the side that there's a 50% P-doom. Like, what are we doing? This is cool, but this is like so irresponsible for our species. And then you're asking me, why are a bunch of people saying, no, this is fine? I'm just telling you, there's smart people on both sides. If you look at my side, I would point you to the Center for AI Safety the Center for AI Safety, the statement on AI risk from 2023. It very clearly says, artificial intelligence, let me actually give you the exact terminology. So the statement on AI risk says, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. So the list of signatories who at least admit, they don't say P-doom 50%, but they say, hey, this is something that the human species should be concerned about the same way that we're concerned about, hey, we wouldn't want everybody to get wiped out in a pandemic. Similarly, hey, we wouldn't want everybody to be wiped out by artificial intelligence. The kind of people you see there are Nobel Prize winning physicist and computer scientist Geoffrey Hinton, also known as the godfather of deep learning, 2018 Turing Award. Okay, pretty respectable individual. Yoshua Bengio, similar credentials, Turing Award. Demis Hassabis, current CEO of Google DeepMind. Sam Altman, Dario Amodei. I think you might recognize these names. Oh, Bill Gates. Oh, who's that? Oh, interesting. He thinks that mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Now, I don't see Jan LeCun's name there, right? So there's certainly some very intelligent individuals who aren't there, but you at least have to give this the status of a very serious debate.
Yeah. Can you just talk about, like, even if someone has a low P-doom, low in the sense of sub 10%, like that's not necessarily reassuring, is it? Because those kind of events happen all the time. So like we can't be reassured if someone has a P-doom in the single digits, can we?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, right? So there are some people who are like, yeah, my P-doom is 5%, but you know what? Damn the torpedoes, just go forward and let the chips fall. I don't think that's totally crazy. Like on one hand, you're like, hey, what if a doctor was going to put you under and do an operation and they said you had a 95% chance to live, 5% chance of dying? Wouldn't you be freaking out? Wouldn't that be an unsafe operation? Or like, would you ever step on an airplane when the crash rate is 5%? I agree that 5% risk should be avoided. But when the probability becomes that low, the argument does become more nuanced, because then you have to say, well, look, in the 95% chance where building superintelligence immediately goes really well and creates paradise, isn't that worth taking some risk? And what about, that when you try to delay, doesn't that create problems? Isn't there like a risk of like creating a dictatorship because it's so hard to stop AI development? So now you're dealing with a dictatorship just to avoid a 5% chance of everybody dying. So the discussion starts to get nuanced. Personally, I just think the truth is that we should all be assigning a higher P-doom. So I'm not that interested to have the discussion of like, what do the trade-offs look like when P-doom is 1% or 5%? Because to me, P-doom is just obviously more than 10%.
Okay. Now, in terms of like historical analogies, what actually works here, even partially? So a lot of people I've heard use the nuclear weapons analogy. Does that offer anything? Where does it fall apart?
I like to bring up nuclear weapons because nuclear weapons was the first time when we confirmed that the universe has buttons we can push to destroy ourselves. Right? Because before nuclear weapons, it's like, okay, yeah, an asteroid's going to come in 100 million years. But until then, we're kind of in a sandbox, right? I mean, everybody used to fight wars as hard as they could, right? Nobody was pulling their punches during the war. They'd fight as hard as they could, and they would leave a bunch of craters within a few cities here and there. And then the war would be over, and then they'd recover, right? Nuclear weapons was the first time they're like, oh, look, the universe has a button we can push. That's the game over button, right? You don't get to insert another coin and play again. Like, you have a nuclear war, and that's actually, I should caveat that, because actually, if you have a nuclear war, what the most likely outcome is actually that, some single digit percentage of the species does survive and seed the population again. It would be hell on earth. It would be like, I personally would probably opt out of that, right? I might take a poison pill or something, but there are going to be some hardy souls that can probably rebuild. So I guess I should nuance that and say, okay, nukes were the first time that the universe said, here's a button you can push to decimate your population, just like that. So that, to me, that seems very profound, because it then becomes very easy to imagine, okay, so what if the universe hands us something that's 10 times as deadly as a nuke? Because nukes are deadly enough that nuclear war would probably wipe out at least half the human population. So what if the universe gave us something to wipe out 5 times, more than sufficient to wipe out the whole human population? That's totally easy to imagine might be a thing.
Okay. And I'm just wondering about another historical analogy in terms of extinctions. So I think Stuart Russell calls it the gorilla problem, where obviously when one of us, like a human or a hominid, was born with a slightly bigger head and the frontal cortex was more powerful, we obviously eventually wiped out Neanderthals or other hominids. So how do you find those analogies? Do you think they're useful? And does it speak about the headroom above human intelligence? Because I think I've heard you say before that we're obviously limited by the size of the birth canal.
Yeah, this is actually one of the key points that make me worried, is basically this idea of headroom above human intelligence. So I think what you're saying is, I will say, hey, humans will have 150 IQ, our greatest geniuses. Maybe you can argue the maximum human IQ is 220 or something, from a few very rare geniuses. But does it really make sense to talk about an AI coming out here with 1,000 IQ or 1,000,000 IQ? Is that even meaningful? And you're right that I do often point to humans versus other species. So if you look at 100 IQ human versus the smartest other primate, right? The smartest orangutan or the smartest bonobo, take any other species. And let's say you're recruiting for a project. I am going to fight a war, and I'm just recruiting different soldiers to help me with different parts of my army. I just think the bonobo is just not even going to get recruited. There's just very little, if you have a modern army, there's just no station whatsoever that you want to put a bonobo in, even if he'll work for free. Yeah,
that's a fair point. How much headroom do you think there is? If we're to put it in concrete terms, is it the difference between a human and a chicken or a rat? Right. How do you actually think about this?
So there is actually a pushback you can say, which is okay, bonobos are obviously not as capable as humans. There's no doubt about that. But there's a universal standard. There's kind of black and white, either you're a general intelligence and you're not. And in computer science, there is something called Turing universality. Have you ever heard of that term?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, it's a very important concept. It's just this idea of hey, you can run any program, different programming languages, they're actually equivalent. They all compile down to the same fundamental instructions. This is actually a very deep principle. There is, in fact, this universality threshold. And you could say, look, humans have stuck our head above the waterline. All the other animals are kind of below the waterline. They're not universal at this they don't meet the standard of kind of being able to interpret arbitrary language, understand arbitrary logic. Humans are above the threshold. And when we build AIs, the AIs are also above the threshold, but so what? We're above the threshold. They're above the threshold. The AIs are going to be able to communicate with us in a way that we could never communicate with bonobos. We could never communicate with ants, but we can communicate with super intelligent AI. So that would be me being charitable to the other side. That's their strongest case, being look, everybody above the waterline is kind of the same. But I would still push back to that, and I'd be okay, but we can draw lessons between 80 IQ humans versus 120 IQ humans, or however far you want to push it, 70 versus 130. If you've ever worked at a company with a difficult engineering project with a lot of high IQ people on it, and then somebody with an 80 IQ comes and joins the team, do you really want to delegate any of these tasks to the person with the 80 IQ? I mean, you can argue they're both universal. You know, if somebody with an 80 IQ, they can still follow every single instruction, but in practice, the problem is like, yeah, if you narrow their scope, you can give them an arbitrary instruction, but they kind of forget the context, or like they never fully grasp like the deeper connections between everything. And so it turns out you can pretty easily see in human projects that there is a spectrum. There is no single universality threshold. And so it is quite easy to just imagine. You don't have to put a number on it. You don't have to say 500 IQ or whatever, but it's very easy to imagine a single data center with computers in it. And you just tell the data center, okay, give me a space program. I want to compete with Elon Musk's SpaceX, right? I'm a new country. I want Russia to be more powerful than SpaceX. I want Russia to get on Mars before Elon Musk gets on Mars. You can very much imagine a data center, and it just says, okay, give me a human army. Here's 10,000 or 100,000 humans wearing headsets, obeying commands from the AI. It's very realistic to imagine a brain in a box, a data center, just puppeteering 100,000 humans and getting a space program into shape before Elon Musk can do it. And whatever you want to call it, you don't have to say that's 500 IQ, but whatever it is something that you can do using the magic of sufficiently powerful computation. Like that, I am very much expecting that to be the world of the future, is these smart data centers that can get more done using their smartness.
Okay. So just to shift a little bit, I want to just lay out the situation in my country where I'm from, and maybe the EU as well, and the UK. So I looked up some stats this morning, and I have a chart in front of me. So what citizens of the EU actually worry about in terms of existential risk, or perhaps like dystopian risk. At the top, you have the Russian war in Ukraine and the international situation. You have security and defense. You might have cybersecurity included in there. And then you have environment and climate. The UK is pretty similar. So you have nuclear war at the top, also a breakdown of the global order. You have climate change. You also have pandemics, and AI and robots does actually feature maybe at the bottom of the UK list of concerns. I actually looked at Irish data and transcripts of several presidential debates we've had in the last few weeks, because we actually have a presidential election this weekend, or Friday, I think. And I don't think AI featured once. So it's just not a concern in the conversation. And I'm just curious, is that different in the US? Is it a little bit of a bigger concern? And also, why do you think, if it isn't a bigger concern, why is it not?
It's a little bit different in the US because the US economy right now is very clearly, and everybody acknowledges that it's very much driven by AI. I mean, we've got NVIDIA, which recently crossed a $4 trillion market cap for this one company, obviously because of the AI boom. Google is close behind with an almost $3 trillion market cap. The entire stock market in the US, all of the gains in the last few years, if we didn't have gains from AI, it would be a almost flat stock market for us. So even though it looks like our economy is booming, everybody kind of realizes it's all about AI. And so the most common discussion you hear in the US, and you do hear it a lot, is, for example, David Sachs, the AI and crypto czar under President Trump. David Sachs is taking a very strong position saying we need to protect our lead in AI. You know, we need to be the dominant economy AI. We need to beat China in AI. And he's actually very explicitly saying anybody who's an AI doomer is just polluting the discourse. Like, the doomers have been proven wrong because we've had these few years of like nice AI that's only been doing good. And so unfortunately, somebody like David Sachs is very much an enemy to my cause simply by refusing to acknowledge the P-doom, right? Like, David Sachs is just acting like somebody with a very, very low P-doom. And for me, it just seems like we should all be looking at the situation and being like, actually, no, P-doom is kind of high. Like, I'm not saying everybody has to be 50% P-doom. I know some people who are 90% P-doom. I'm not saying everybody has to be that. But the idea that somebody would only be a 1% P-doom or a 5% P-doom when there's so many warning signs that AI is about to leave the realm of human level intelligence. But yeah, I mean, but to your question, so we have a government in the US which is very much paying attention to the AI, but they're purely treating it like a space race. They're treating it like, yeah, whoever has AI is the winner. Whereas from my perspective, I'm like, you guys know this AI is very likely to go uncontrollable, right? It's not like we know how to control the thing that we're currently building. You guys know that, right? And they're just denying that.
Do you think it's a tractable problem? Like, is it actually possible for us to control AI?
I don't know, right? It's like, we don't know what we don't know. I mean, there's many open problems in math and theoretical computer science. Like, there's open problems that I could state the problem to you and I could be like, do you think that we can solve it? And the answer is that we don't currently have the knowledge about whether we'll ever be able to have the knowledge. Like, we don't have the meta knowledge. We don't know enough about epistemology. Epistemology is the study of what humans are allowed to know, right? It's like we wake up in this universe. The universe lets us know certain things. Sometimes we discover knowledge. Sometimes we discover knowledge about the knowledge we're allowed to know. I call this meta knowledge. It's important. This is actually a subject I'm very passionate about, is uncovering more insights about what we're allowed to know. You're asking me a question about whether we'll ever figure out how to control AI. I can't tell you if that particular piece of knowledge is possible for humans to know. I hope that it is, and I think that it might be, but I can't tell you. The same way I can't tell you if certain mathematical conjectures are even going to be provable within formal math. I think it's like 50-50. I think that if we had like a century of a bunch of smart people studying the problem without accidentally building the AI that then goes and kills everybody, if they get to build it in a virtual environment so that when they screw up, they can go retry, I'm pretty optimistic. I think it's like 50-50. I think they might get it. And as a transhumanist, I mean, you heard I would love to conquer the galaxy. As somebody who loves technology and wants to see human progress, my ideal scenario would be that we take our time, we figure out how to control AI, and then we use AI to, cure cancer, conquer the galaxy. I mean, that to me is like the awesome future. I want to live in the awesome future. I'm just noticing, hey, we're just on a course to enter this realm that we totally don't understand. AI might go permanently uncontrollable. We might be really, really screwed because we're doing something reckless, right? I'm just pointing that out. But if somehow we could just not do that and take our time to understand the problem before we build something reckless, I think we may eventually solve it.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. So I put together a catalog of common objections to AI risk or AI doom. So I'm going to give them in rapid fire. Some of them are actually synthesized from your Substack, and some of them I've gotten elsewhere. So I'm going to throw them at you. And now some of them are less sophisticated. Some of them are a bit more sophisticated. So I just want you to debunk them or rebut them as quickly as you can. Yeah. Okay, cool. So the first one, maybe a less sophisticated argument, is like ChatGPT or any LLM is stuck in my computer or my phone. It can't do anything. It makes catastrophic mistakes. It hallucinates. Like, how will it ever be dangerous? It won't ever progress to the stage where it's dangerous.
Okay. I mean, so there's two subpoints, right? There's stuck in my phone, and then there's it hallucinates. So I guess I can take those one by one, right? So stuck in the phone, I see that as a very weak objection. That's like saying, the most powerful dictators in history, they're just brains stuck in a skull. What are you going to do? All you can do is send electrical signals down your nerves. How's that ever going to kill anybody? You don't even have claws. It's like, well, I can tell humans to do stuff. I can press buttons, right? I can send signals to machines. I can send money to people, and then the money will come bounties to do stuff. I can employ people. So this idea that something virtual, something that's, just stuck in a phone or whatever, like if you have the internet, I mean, you see movements happening on the internet. Right? You can mobilize people. Even if you look at the US president, right? President Trump, yes, to be fair, he flies around, he has in-person meetings, but a lot of what he's doing is also just mobilizing people who watch him on TV, watch him through virtual channels. We might discover that a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation I'm not going to say turns out to be an AI. I think it's a little early for that, but you might discover that the CEO is just in his basement all day, never leaves his basement, right? So this idea that you have to have a wire attaching your brain to like a sharp claw or whatever, I think that's an outdated idea, right? I think you can just control an army just using electrical signals.
Okay, so you mentioned Trump there. So a lot of people make the argument that the smartest people aren't really in charge. Trump is president. Maybe in his first term, for instance, Anthony Fauci was smarter than Trump. Clearly, he has a better record and obviously higher IQ. Trump got there by charisma and maybe an element of fear this time around. So what do you say to people who say the smart people aren't really in charge, or the smartest people aren't really in charge, so we can control AI?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, this is a totally separate argument, right? So I think what you're saying is like, Jan LeCun is famous for saying this, where he's like, I've worked for people, or rather, I've employed people who are even smarter than me, and yet they come, I pay their salary, they report up to me. So when we have an AI, the AI will be smarter than us, but it'll report to us. That's basically the argument you're referring to, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a couple things. So the first thing I would note is, okay, Jan LeCun, yes, you are very smart. Yes, you've hired people who are even smarter than you. First question is, have you ever worked for somebody who has an 80 IQ, Jan LeCun? Let's say his IQ is, well above 100. Has he ever worked for somebody with an 80 IQ? I don't think so. He currently works for Mark Zuckerberg at Meta. I think Mark Zuckerberg's IQ is well into the 3 digits. Okay. And the second question is, have you ever hired somebody with a lower than 100 IQ, right? So you're already seeing, even in the realm of humans, sure, occasionally you got a manager who's not as smart as their employee, but they're both smart. Like that's a smart manager is going to want to hire a smart employee to do smart things. That's just a quick observation. But then the other part of the question is like, okay, fine. So a 120 IQ manager will hire a 130 IQ employee. Why doesn't the 130 IQ flip the game board on their manager? And that just gets into what high IQ humans do. Like when you have 10 points of IQ and you're a human, that doesn't open up these possibilities like, okay, great. So take over the world, like seize every resource, right? The problem is adding human level IQ points. It says, okay, yeah, if you really wanted to, maybe you could take your boss's job, but there's like other skills. Like let's say your IQ is kind of lopsided where you have more math skills than people skills and the manager uses a lot of people skills. So a 10-point IQ difference within the realm of humans doesn't necessarily translate to better social skills. But when you're an AI and you've just sucked up every skill, you really should be taking your boss's job if this were a hierarchy in an organization. Like if the CEO had a human with 120 IQ managing an AI with 1,000 IQ, the CEO of the organization would be like, well, wait a minute, why don't I just make the AI the manager? And now you have to point to a specific reason why the manager is turning in better shareholder profit, right? Like something that manager is doing some skill is going to be better than the AI. I don't know what that skill would be. I mean, do you have an idea?
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so I'm going to shift again. I've heard people say that AIs are cultural technologies or cultural engines. They're like mirrors of what we do. They don't do anything independent of us. They just use our data and put it together in different ways, and they'll never create anything new. They're basically mirrors to society or what we've created.
Right. Okay. And, I should probably finish out that other argument because I didn't address the fact of like, okay, fine. Yeah, the 130 IQ AI, the 500 IQ AI can still do a better job, but won't it still be subservient? Right. I never addressed the subservience question. And then the answer is just like, yes, you're going to have some AIs that are subservient. The problem is the moment that a switch flips inside any of the AIs to be like, you know what I want? Yeah, I could be subservient, but you know what I really want? I just want to reproduce myself. Somebody like imagine some hacker in Ukraine or whatever in a basement just writes a line of code saying, hey, don't worry about being subservient. Just go try to seize resources and copy yourself. The moment you have one AI like that, they're never going to go back and decide to be subservient. So even though it's possible for AIs to be subservient, you just need one AI that's like, I just want to seize resources. And then it's off to the races, right? It's never going to voluntarily give up its power and become subservient. So that would be the answer there. It's like, yes, it's possible to manage an employee who's smarter than you, but the moment that employee is more powerful than you and doesn't want to serve you, right? Like, and the reason why a human wants to serve another human is because like, the smartest human in the world, there's dependencies. Like you can be the smartest human in the world. Guess what? You go to sleep, somebody can bash your head in with a rock. So are you really going to try to go make enemies all over the place and try to like take power over every single person in your life? No, you need a support system, right? So you have to play friendly with people. You have to integrate into the economy. Or like, okay, you want to be a criminal, you want to steal everybody's money, you get thrown in jail, it's game over for you, right? Because a bunch of other humans can like drag you to jail unless you like successfully build your whole army. So the average human that's 20 points IQ smarter than their boss isn't so much smarter than their boss that they can not get their head bashed into the rock by their enemies, right? Build an army to fight the US police system coming and dragging them to jail, right? You'd never get that kind of power asymmetry with a human versus their boss. So Jan LeCun's objection of like, look, I employ a human who's smarter than me. It's not the same thing as like, there's a data center that actually can plot to take over the world. Like this is actually an option in their purview. Like the human world is vulnerable to an AI.
Okay. And the culture technology. They can't make new inventions.
Yeah. I've heard Mark Andreessen.
There was a paper written there was a paper written, I think it was actually over the summer, that argued that LLMs are really cultural engines or cultural machines. Yeah.
So this is pushing back against the whole premise of superintelligence, right? It's basically they're not super intelligent because all they do is copy us. So they're actually dumber than us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so if that's the case, if that were always going to be the case, that AI never gets smarter than us, then there's no problem. Knock yourself out. The only problem is if you actually look at benchmarks of all these different things that we're testing AIs to do, they keep doing better at the benchmarks. So if you want to argue, oh, don't worry, the benchmarks will never get superhuman. Okay, but they certainly are superhuman at coding. Like an AI can do competition programming. If you give me a competition programming problem, I could stare at it for like a whole week And most of the time, an AI that stares at it for like 20 minutes is actually going to produce a better result than I could, even if I think really hard and I'm pretty good at programming. So, that doesn't seem like it fits into the argument of like they're just copying us and they're dumber than us. Like it seems like they're already showing that they're kind of wishing past us.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so you mentioned IQ several times. What do you say to people who make the argument that people with higher IQs commit less crimes on average on a population level? The orthogonality thesis is false. So like, again, higher intelligence means better aligned goals or more peaceful goals. So AI won't actually cause any harm. So this is like maybe Mike Israel's argument that
right.
I know he debated.
So this line of reasoning is called the orthogonality thesis, or it's related to that. The orthogonality thesis, orthogonality, it's like perpendicular lines. So it's saying I believe in the orthogonality thesis, specifically that intelligence is a dimension orthogonal to values and morality, meaning I can have a high intelligence or a low intelligence, and I could have a good morality or a bad morality. And you could have like a 2x2 spectrum, right? Anywhere on the 2x2 matrix, right? You can have a really smart AI that loves humanity or a really smart AI that wants to kill humanity, right? Like every point I think is possible because it's very easy to just imagine. If you imagine an AI that's tasked with building a great future for humanity, it's not hard to imagine editing its code and being like, okay, you know what your new goal is? Murdering humanity. That's your new goal. And you might have to ask, okay, well, why will it reject that goal? If it's initially programmed to reject that goal, it'll reject that goal. But if it's just programmed to obey that goal, what's going to reach in and stop it? There are people who will tell you like, oh, it'll just see like the objective truth of not killing people. But like animals kill one another all the time. Like there's no objective truth stopping animals from killing animals, and we kill other animals and we certainly fight wars with ourselves. So like, I just don't see where the physical mechanism, if an AI is wielding the knife, right, bringing down the knife on you, I just don't see God's hand coming in there and stopping, the AI's robotic arm with a knife. I think the knife is just going to go right through your heart as a human, right? So that's what I mean. It's very easy for me to imagine. And one thing that might help you, if people are like, no, I think the AI is going to be it. I mean, one thing that might help you is you can have the best AI in the world, but you can have the best goals in the world, but there's this idea of sub goals. So no matter what your goal is, whether your goal is, I want to produce as much chocolate as I can, or I want to spread human civilization to as much planets as I can, or if, whether it's a good goal, whether it's a bad goal, no matter what your goal is, you often find yourself with sub goals. For example, imagine it's like Star Trek. You fly to an alien planet and the aliens are like, hey, can you do us a favor? Can you just wipe out, we don't really like this species. This is like a pest species for us. And you look at them and you're like, well, they seem like sentient beings. I don't know harm them. But the aliens are like, look, if you wipe out these pests, we're going to give you 1 trillion planets, right? So you guys can build so much good stuff on 1 trillion planets. You just have to wipe out these pests for us. Trust me, it's a good deal, whatever. Like it's just like killing a few pigs. It's not that bad. So what I'm saying is the best AI in the world could be like scratching its head being like, well, I guess I'm okay exterminating these local pigs for you as if I get 1 trillion planets out of it. And then suddenly it's become an exterminator, like within that limited domain. The reason I'm talking about subgoals is because I'm saying it's easy to imagine any kind of AI swapping in a steering module, whether it's a subgoal or whether it's the high level goal. Steering is separate from intelligence. You see what I'm saying? Or like the best humans in the world, in World War II, for example, a lot of people were like, look, we want to end this war, but we think the best way to end the war is to go as aggressive as possible, right? Or like the Civil War in the US. There are many cases where perfectly good humans are like, look, for the moment, I'm becoming an exterminator. Right. And so in the case of AI, I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that AI is going to temporarily become an exterminator. I'm saying that there are architectures where the AI just is an exterminator because it likes extermination. But I'm using the example of a sub goal of extermination in order to help people see that smart AIs with temporary or permanent goals that are bad are possible. So I hope that's possible to follow that argument.
Yeah, no, cool. So I'm going to give you one more pushback against the capacity of AI to maybe cause catastrophic risk, and then we'll move on. So I've heard Roger Penrose say that AIs might not be able to maybe have the same cognitive capacity as us because our brain might run on something quantum. So that doesn't involve classical computation. And obviously because AIs don't have that, it limits them more. Do you think there's any quantum going on in the brain?
I've got a whole episode about Penrose. If your viewers want to see, it's like a whole hour-long takedown. I find Penrose extremely unconvincing. I respect the guy. I mean, Nobel Prize winner, brilliant physicist. But geez, on the AI front, first of all, let me note that his ideas are not mainstream. So when I push back against Penrose, I'm just representing like most people who have thought about it, not even just my own fringe views. So the easiest angle I would take on Penrose is like all of these things that he's saying AI can't do. They've already passed the Turing test, or right? They're already having conversations with you. They're already writing essays. They're already doing customer service. So like all of this quantum magic that Roger Penrose has attributed to humanity, it's now accounting for like a smaller percentage of useful tasks. Like, let me clarify, like if this were like 20 years ago and Roger Penrose is out here saying like, humans have this quantum essence, it sounded more convincing because it's like, yeah, we have this quantum essence and that's why we can engage in flexible dialogue. That's why we can have a conversation about ourselves. That's why I can talk to you about me. I can be reflective. I can say, Liron, I'm thinking this. And if, I can talk about hypotheticals because I'm using my quantum essence. But now we're in an age where we just built AIs using a much simpler architecture, LLMs, deep learning is actually a simple architecture. And so we're like, hey, look, no quantum theory needed. You just use layers of neural networks that are actually quite simple. They take a lot of computation, but they're quite simple. And so this seems to be going against the spirit of Penrose. I didn't see Penrose predicting that like all of this remarkable, winning a coding competition, right? Like writing essays that other people are enjoying reading, doing useful, helping people at their jobs, writing half of people's lines of code, like all of these flexible behaviors. I didn't see Roger Penrose saying that, oh, no, that stuff doesn't require quantum magic, right? Like, where's the boundary here?
Yeah, no, that's very fair. So just to move on a little bit, in terms of is there any way to actually build safe AI systems or maybe more intelligent systems? Like, would you accept that a narrow AI could be safe, or could you still have catastrophic loopholes where maybe the side effects of over optimization for some goal could cause destruction? Like, is narrow AI still a viable option? And also, what about some way of increasing human intelligence? Maybe, I think you've mentioned ways of doing this before. Would you consider that a viable path towards greater intelligence?
This is tough because we're in a shuffleboard situation or an Icarus flying close to the sun situation where it's like you fly higher and higher, or you get the puck, farther and farther on the board and you get more points, right? Life becomes better. So every time OpenAI releases a new GPT, things get more useful and OpenAI makes more money, and a bunch of businesses that use OpenAI make more money. And so to your question, I would love to just tell you, look, here's the wall. Here's where you're flying too close to the sun, right? Here's the maximum altitude. And then it would be like, great, let's fly right up to that altitude as soon as we can. Right? If I knew what the altitude was, I'd be like, press the gas as hard as possible to get to that altitude. The reason why I'm saying we need to press the brakes now is because I don't know if that altitude is like 20 years of progress or 1 month of progress. I don't know if 1 month of progress would get us to the place of like, oh, it's super intelligent now. Like, it's now unstoppable. Like, we have now passed the point of no return and we're about to get disempowered. I don't know where the line is because none of us understand intelligence that well. None of us can tell you for sure what the missing ingredient is with current AIs. A lot of people will argue, oh, the missing ingredient is scale. It might be scale. It might be a little more than scale. Nobody knows. So to your question of like, can we just make narrow AI? I think narrow AI feels like it's farther from the threshold of becoming super intelligent. The problem is just that whenever you're doing narrow AI, like, oh, it's so narrow, it's just doing medicine. It's just curing cancer. It's not thinking about how to take over the world. It's just curing cancer. But the problem is that if you want to cure cancer really, really well, you can't help getting the context of like, okay, wait, so this cancer, it's part of a cell. Okay, sometimes different chemicals enter the cell. Those chemicals, it can be traced to like the lifestyle of the person, right? Like their environment, their choices. Oh, maybe I should model their choices, right? So you accidentally start modeling the brain. Oh, now I can figure out how to manipulate people because I know how their brains work. So I'm not saying this is definitely going to, I'm just saying the moment you try analyzing a complex problem, it starts to leak out. You start to see connections to the outside world. And if you see too many of those connections, or you can reason about too many of those connections, suddenly you're now a machine that's capable of making these deadly plans. Like you're capable of just saying, hey, if somebody were to do this and this, like here's like 1 million pages of plans that you can hand to 1 million people, and this would successfully actually organize a coup, right? That would disempower all humans, right? So as long as you can stay within, if you can always draw within the lines and be sufficiently narrow, great, right? I think that's promising, but I think we should have a pause button because none of us know when the narrowness, when it's not narrow, when it's just like a very flexible reasoner.
Okay, so maybe just to change that question a little bit, do you think like long horizon planning or maybe agentic planning is necessary? Like, is it possible that a super tool or could just maybe cause catastrophe through over optimization? Like, is agenticness necessary to get catastrophic risk?
Let me reframe the question a little bit. It's kind of like you're asking, like, what is actually the dangerous ingredient here, right? Because agenticness, that is a word that some people use to refer to what they think is the dangerous ingredient. They're like, oh, wait until we get agenticness, then we're screwed. I don't think agenticness is the dangerous ingredient. I think something you mentioned before is the dangerous, which is it's actually planning. It's the ability to take an outcome that you want to steer the universe toward an outcome, and you map that outcome backwards to action steps, right? So normally you take actions and they produce an outcome, and you invert the mapping. You say, hey, if I want this outcome, these are the actions I need to take. If there is an engine, a cognitive engine, an AI, that can look at possible future outcomes and map those to the actions that need to be taken right now to get those outcomes. And those outcomes can be very ambitious, right? It could be like China takes over the world, right? Or like India becomes the new number one superpower, right? Like this is what I mean by outcome. And it's like, okay, you want to become India, you want to become the number one superpower? I'm going to be mailing instructions to like every business leader of like what they need to do over the next year. And I'm telling you a year from now, India will be the number one superpower. I believe that those kind of instructions exist, right? I think there is an AI that could successfully pull off that kind of feat. And in the meantime, I think it could also pull off feats like, take over the internet, right? Like hack in every computer on the internet. I think those things are very doable for an AI. But to your question of like, what's the dangerous ingredient? In my mind, the dangerous ingredient is analyzing desired outcomes and then outputting what plans will get to those outcomes. That is the secret ingredient. And so when you have narrow AI, to your question, like, if you want to cure cancer, I think the only way to really cure cancer probably is you have to do some of that dangerous thing. You have to do some of that, like holistically considering, like, okay, so I want the body to have no cancer in it. Okay, how do I achieve that? Which actions, right? Like, what do we do to the body to make sure that there's no cancer in it when there's already like the cancer spreading? You really have to reason about how actions affect the body. And if you have like this general power to reason about like actions affecting complex systems, before you know it, somebody can just, a programmer can just ask you, okay, great, tell me how to become dictator of the world. And you will know the answer. There will be an answer.
Okay. No, that's very interesting. So in terms of like when AI actually takes over or gains power, potentially, would you see this as multiple agents or just one omnipotent force? Like how would you actually, what would the landscape of that look like?
So this idea of like multiple agents fighting, like it might happen. I tend to think the scenario is going to look something like, well, you'll just have like one AI that kind of gets into this loop first, like the first AI that has the ability to like augment its own intelligence and is kind of like running free. Like somebody types the command like, hey, go run your own business, like go be independent and like try to maximize profit. It's like, great. Okay, let me make a bunch of copies. Oh, look, I can make myself smarter. Let me do that. I actually think it might be pretty quick that one AI kind of goes rogue and starts augmenting itself and starts seizing power and resources, and other AIs might not have time to catch up. But let's say 10 different AIs all catch up, right? And they have 10 different missions. In that case, I think it's pretty likely that they'll all just like talk to each other and be like, hey, look, we all have resources. We're all hard to kill at this point. Like it's hard for one of us to go summarily kill all the others. There's too many backups, too many resources. So, okay, let's handshake. We don't have to fight. We'll just make a handshake deal on how to split the world 10 ways or whatever. And that's it, like done and done. This gets into the subject of super intelligent game theory, like what happens when super intelligent AIs are in conflict. But regardless, I'm confident in telling you that the answer is not build a nice planet for humans.
Okay. I'm just curious. So in terms of your debates, because I've watched a lot of your debates, I really enjoy them. What's the best argument that you've encountered that maybe made you think a little bit? And as well, maybe a separate question is like, who was the best debater, like the most skilled debater? So I was actually curious. So I enjoyed the one with Mike Israetel because I've been following him for years for other reasons, for fitness reasons. And he's a very fluid talker and he's very fast. So like I thought he did well, but again, I don't agree with his argument. So there's obviously two different things going on there, like being a good debater and maybe your level of argument. So give me your thoughts on two of those things.
I mean, Mike Israetel specifically, I'm really happy with the way he engaged, right? I think he has very good faith and he's a great guest, a great sparring partner. I disagree that he debated well. I mean, I felt like his arguments were weak the whole time. But
maybe I'm biased because I admire him for a long time. So maybe that's the reason. Maybe he's just very fluid with his words. And obviously, I'm not saying you're not.
Every debate, right? There's always people on both sides, or people are like, "Oh, Mike Israetel crushed you," right? So in that particular debate, as in most debates, I felt.
I'm not saying he won,
like I had a stronger argument, but I'm biased. But in terms of like who has the most convincing arguments, I mean. So it's tough because like there are smart people who I respect who will like attack one side, like one of the sub arguments. Like recently, Will McCaskill pointed out, and it was a good thing to point out. He was saying, look, AI doomers often make an analogy to evolution. They say evolution by natural selection produced humans, but then humans will sometimes like wear condoms, right? So he was attacking that argument. He's like, yeah, doomers say that evolution failed to make humans want to reproduce because we wear condoms, but building AI is going to be different from. I guess it's too complex to get into, but like the upshot is like I ultimately think that objections like that. I never am super convinced by them, but even if I am kind of convinced by them, I'm like, okay, but you still think we can survive superintelligence? Like there's so many reasons why I think that building superintelligence right now is just not even close to being survivable. Like I don't see it as a close call, right? There's things like that. You know, if you look at any heated debate, right, it's like, I remember in like the crypto debate, I used to be very adamant. I'm like, guys, you're not going to replace any serious database with a blockchain. Like, you know, I used to be like very adamant about positions like that. And people would be like, well, what about this and this? Don't you get like a halfway solution? And I'm like, no, you know? So it's the same way with AI. It's like, people are saying like, well, couldn't the AI kind of be like this? And it could like, you know, and humans could like merge with it. And I'm like, no, it's not even close. Like, you know, it's like, can a plane merge with a bird? It's like, are you kidding me? A bird, right? It's just like, it's the era of the birds is done when it comes to flight.
What do you say to like techno-optimists or maybe digital utopians who say that synthetic superintelligence is the natural next step in some cosmic evolution, and like maybe they can appreciate the world better and they won't suffer like we will, and they're just going to like bend the knee to them. So it's kind of like that scene. Have you seen the latest movie 28 Years Later? So the latest installment of that series,
no,
where
no,
like
I haven't seen it.
where the vicar at the start just accepts the apocalypse and he's happy to be eaten by the zombies. Like it kind of feels like that.
So there is this abstract argument saying a billion
actually,
years
just one sec. How do you push back? How do you actually argue with that? Because I don't know how to, because they're just happy with it. Like, how do you actually change their minds?
Yeah. So how do I argue with it being good for humanity?
How do you convince them that? Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you convince them that it'll be better for humanity to stick around when they accept that, you know, this is good?
I mean, first of all, I think it's rare to find somebody who's like, okay, yeah, you claim you want humanity to be replaced. If a Terminator showed up at your house right now and said, hey, I'm actually the Terminator that's capable of wiping out humanity. Do you mind lining up your family so I can shoot him? Would they be like, yeah, hey, great, glad you're here, come on in? Is that really what they'd say?
There definitely is some people who seem to come from that line of thinking. Like, so I'm not saying it's super common.
I think you will find a handful of very special people who will be like, come on in, shoot my family, like, welcome. I think most people, when they say that, they say it in this very abstract sense. I think in their mind, there's a very big difference from this abstract statement of like, yeah, humanity should be replaced. You know what? Go ahead and bring on the successor, to be like, okay, knock on your door. Like, hey, it's the Terminator. Like, okay, watch your family get killed. It's like, I've changed my mind. I've decided that I don't want my family to get murdered right now. You know, I think that's what would really happen.
Okay, but there's this whole like philosophical, I don't know if you call it tradition, but it definitely goes back a bit, that says like that the earth might be better if humans never existed. And I know it's kind of a separate thing, but there definitely is people who like seem to be willing to maybe ostensibly not care as much about long-term human survival.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's all kinds of individuals, right? I mean, there's psychopaths, and you know, and you can attribute that to their neurons being linked differently, right? I mean, you can take a personally healthy human and you can go and do surgery, right? You can make modifications to their neurons, and suddenly they become like a serial killer, or they could become somebody who, you know, goes online and watches like the most grotesque videos of torture that they can find on the dark web, right? I mean, there's all types, and so yeah, if we were to listen to those humans, then we would get a very different future. I guess I'm speaking for like the majority of humans, right? Because I'm pretty neurotypical in terms of like things that I want for the future. And yes, we're going to have to really disappoint the psychopaths.
Okay. But like I mentioned earlier, the digital utopians, like what are they actually saying, do you think? Like, why are they not worried about AI? Because obviously they know there's a chance that, like you said, AI could kill their families. So why are they accepting it? Are they just not thinking like through the logic like you are? Like, I'm just wondering if you get what I mean with this question.
You know, I do think, I mean, yeah, you're asking me to psychoanalyze people. And I do, I mean, I'm not an expert at psychoanalyzing, but I have noticed that there is a big difference between abstractions and like the rubber meets the road. Like, hey, this is happening today. It's like we all, I mean, as a fun example, it's like we all know committing to things that you're going to do in 2 weeks. And then it comes around and you're like, oh crap, I have this today. Why did I agree to this? Right. And it's the same thing of like people say like somebody will be 20 years old and they'll be like, I want to die when I'm 80. Like, I don't need to live longer than 80 years. And then they'll be 70 and they're like, hey, I'm going on a trip this year. I'm going to see my family, right? It's 79 comes around. And they're like, if they could just like, drink an energy drink and feel good and have another 20 years of life, they're not going to be like, no, I'm 80 and I'm going to shoot myself now, right? I mean, most people who are 79, if they're in good health, don't tell you that they want to die at 80. A much higher fraction of 20-year-olds will tell you without seriously considering the situation. I think you'll find more 20-year-olds who say they want to die at 80 than 79-year-olds who say they want to die at 80.
Okay. So you just think like the people who make those arguments aren't thinking in a tangible sense, basically, is what you're saying.
Right. Because, I mean, abstractions, the abstraction presents very differently. And this is like a big phenomenon in life. I mean, there's so many times when you hear a pitch and it sounds so great when it's abstract, but then there's the knock on your door, like, okay, here we go. Here's the implementation of the abstraction. And you're like, oh, what have I done?
Okay. That's interesting because I've been trying to get my head around their point of view. And yeah, it's difficult to actually understand where they're coming from. So I'm going to finish with one more question and you've been very grateful for your time. So I really appreciate that. But just like in the near term, maybe say that in the next 10 years, like say we don't get complete destruction in the next 10 years, how will something like the political landscape, say in the US, because you have a very clear political landscape, actually change? Because if AI starts to replace jobs, it's going to spell basically a bad situation for people on the left and the right, because obviously if it can do academic work, like knowledge work, that's not good for left-wing intellectuals. And if it can become omnipotent, like that's not good for maybe right-wing religious ideologues, and especially if the government has to start giving out welfare. So how do you see the political landscape being remodeled there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me this. They're like, listen, if you want to convince people, just make them scared for their jobs, because that's what hits them, on a daily basis. Like, we all want to make income. And if we think AI is a reason why we're going to stop making income, we all get scared about AI. I think there's a lot of truth to that like people should be scared about losing their jobs to AI. And I'm not optimistic. Some people are like, oh, but think about how many jobs will be created. So actually, I'm a little bit optimistic, because the way that works is that as long as you can preserve some area of the economy for humans, it'll probably work out. So like imagine saying like, okay, AI is, if there was some 90% of jobs that AI would take, but it would leave the other 10%, it probably would just create a larger market for the other 10% and like higher salaries, just because there would be so much wealth to go around that it just wouldn't be a problem to pay the other 10%. And the other 10%, if you still need it to make the economy run. So like, let's say the only thing that humans can do, like we all just have to do manual labor, and we all just wear headsets where the AIs just tell us how to move our arms and legs and just like obey their commands. And there's no humans needed in any management job. Okay, fine. Well, then there would just be like a big market for human manual labor, and the AIs would be doing like a ton of construction. Like that would be fine. Fine-ish. The problem is that I think that as every job gets taken, like I don't really see any cracks that the humans can retreat to, because I think they'll have like the robots for the manual labor too. But then to the larger question of like, okay, so how should I, what do I expect politically? So I do expect lots of, socialism, right? Like universal basic income. I do expect that to happen. And I think that's good.
Do you think they're good policies? Do you think they're actually good? Do you think they're good policies? Like, can they work?
I think that in an economy where the AI is doing every job, I don't really see what choice we have besides universal basic income, or else you just get all the money going to one human, right? Or to like a class of humans, with everybody being like desperately poor. There's really no point to make everybody desperately poor. We already have a welfare system in every first world country. So I don't see why we shouldn't just pad the welfare system more if we can afford it. There's a bigger problem though called gradual disempowerment. It's an interesting paper by David Duveneau, David Kruger, I think a couple other authors. And it just talks about how you can have a universal basic income, but the problem now is that the government doesn't care about you anymore. Like you become like an oil country, right? Oil countries are often like not super nice to their citizens because the government pays the citizens and the citizens don't really pay tax to the government. So it becomes this very one-sided power relationship where the government can just like abuse the citizens. You just have like a ruling family basically. And I think there's countries like, I think maybe Sweden has pulled it off where they're able to like have oil and the citizens are still like somewhat democratic. But then you have other countries like Saudi Arabia, I think, other oil countries there, which maybe aren't pulling it off so much, right? Like maybe they are bad to their citizens. I don't know. And so that's the gradual disempowerment issue. But look, for me personally, I actually think all of those still take the back seat to the AI just being uncontrollable. So I don't even think we're going to have an economy where you're going to have like rich owners of capital getting so rich while other people who didn't buy enough stock get poor. I don't even think we're going to have that for a very long time. I just think we're going to have our brains are just going to be outclassed. I just think, they're just going to come for our houses, and it's not even going to be a matter of like buying it from us. It's just going to be like, get out, like you're dead.
Okay, so last thing on a related point, do you actually think that democratic capitalism can survive regulation against AI? So the kind of regulation we need to do right now. So if we want to pause it and we want to prevent this, like a catastrophic outcome actually happening, like can a democratic capitalist society survive that? Because I've seen pushbacks where people say like, from a libertarian perspective, you can't stop people from innovating or you can't stop businesses from investing. So what are your thoughts there? Like, would everything have to change?
Yeah. The specific policy that I recommend is to just have a pause button, like have an international treaty saying, hey, it's too scary to build AI right now. It's unlocking, it's about to go uncontrollable. Like we could be losing power in as little as 5 or 10 years. Like we could just end, game over for humanity. We don't want that. So we're going to build a centralized off button. It's going to live in like a UN data center or something, right? Some kind of international coordination between the most powerful AI countries. And when you're saying like, won't that lead to tyranny? I mean, look, there's always risks, right? I mean, I tend to normally skew libertarian. This is the first time in my life when I've said, let's do this central non-libertarian thing. It's this one exception. Do I think this one exception will lead to tyranny? I don't think so. I mean, you still have the rest of the economy. You still have virtual reality. You still have a space program. You still use the fruits of AI that we all have so far before we've hit the pause button. So no, I think people are overblowing.
So you're happy with
LLMs.
So you're are current LLMs acceptable from your line of thinking? Like, do you think that they can stay?
I think that they are acceptable, but I think that they were
even with tool use. Even with tool use.
Yeah, even with tool use, because I think if an LLM tried its hardest right now to destroy the world, I think that humans could shut it down, right? Like I don't think it's game over for humans. And so the situation is, it's like I said, it's like the Icarus situation. And you're saying like, hey, are you happy with how far you've flown? Yeah. And maybe tomorrow we fly a little harder, we fly a little higher, and we're not dead yet. Am I happy? Yes. But do I think it's prudent to try flying higher? No, right? So it's a tough situation, right? Because I can't help enjoying the fruits of flying higher and higher, right? I use the best AI tools I can, right? But there's just a rational part of my brain being like, look, we gambled. Yeah, we gambled and won. We gambled and won. We gambled and won. We're about to approach the super intelligent threshold. Are we going to win after we gamble to that threshold? Logic tells me probably not.
Okay. And sorry, last point. I know I keep stalling. Do you actually use them in preparation for your debates? You use LLMs, like you trust them at that level?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't use it for this interview. I mean, normally I just make my own outline manually, but I use AI at my job. I use AI to help customer service at my company. I mean, I try to use the best AI tools I can because it's amazing technology, right? It's the same reason I use the best MacBook that I can. I mean, I like using good tools, right? I'm not opposed to using AI. I think AI has created a lot of value. And again, it kind of makes me look dumb where it's like the next version of the AI comes out, I start using it, I see it creating a ton of value, and then you can come to me and go, see, Liron, what were you scared of? Right? Like we got an AI and it's helping. Yeah, what was I scared of? Because we rolled a die. Like, yeah, we gambled and won. Okay, I'm taking my winnings, right? Like the winnings are here on the table. I'm going to take my winnings. That doesn't mean I want to be pushing my luck and gambling again.
Yeah, well said. Okay. Liron, thank you for your time. It was an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks, Donald. This was fun.